Hi there, and welcome to this short video where we're going to be looking at customer health checks. So I'm delighted to be joined by my colleague Mark Byrne, and we're going to go through the process of a customer health check. But before we do that, let's just have a bit of a word about when a health check is appropriate and why we do those. So Mark, first and foremost, when's a good time to do a health check with a customer?
Pretty much any time. I mean, the last thing you want to do is wait until renewal. We need to be engaging with customers, talking to them at pretty much any stage of that cycle. So yeah, I mean, the sooner the better, to be honest. Probably a regular 6-month cadence is not unreasonable for the SMB to enterprise range.
Mhm.
And yeah, it's about an hour. It doesn't take that long to do. We sit with the customer, go through their console, and looking at some of the settings that either potentially could trip them up or could be misconfigured to cause them risk and exposure. And then we also get into a little bit of the how do we best use the product that you've actually bought. And that kind of sometimes leads into other conversations around, is there anything else we might be able to help you with in terms of consolidation, bringing out complicated cybersecurity products into one single platform?
Okay, so it's an opportunity to make sure the customer's getting the most out of the product they've got, but there is
Correct.
always that potential. There might be other things that would be appropriate out of Sophos portfolio too. So sounds like it's a really good opportunity for reseller partners to engage with their end users. So I guess the next question then is what do you need to be prepared in order to carry out a customer health check?
Essentially, then we just need to have the super admin, the one who's responsible for logging into Central and configuring that. That's the account we'll need to log in with the customer. So from a Sophos perspective, we're not going to be doing anything in their estate. We're not going to be making any changes. It's more of just a consultative and an advisory capacity. So yeah, that's kind of all we need. So we need the super admin from the customer side and a Sophos engineer or whoever's going to be doing the health check.
Okay. And if the partner wanted to do a health check for themselves, is there any kind of documentation that we can maybe help them with, give them some guidance on the sort of things to be looking through?
Yeah, completely. I mean, we've got a few spreadsheets we can use just as pointers to these are the areas that we'd like to look at, and then produce an overall sort of PDF and a report. It's entirely into how the customer and the partner really wants to interact and present the findings ultimately. But there's many different ways of doing it, and we've got a bit of a short template to sort of help hit those points that we really want to talk about.
Fantastic. All right. Well, we've talked enough. Shall we hop into Software Central and go and take a look?
Okay, so now we're in Sophos Central. This is the new version of Sophos Central with the new interface. So we're going to be looking at how we operate Sophos Central in the new world. And essentially then what we'd start with is a quick look at the dashboard itself. How many alerts has the customer got? How many high, how many medium, how many lows? And the talking here is who's logging in and looking at these alerts. Can they manage these alerts? Especially if there's a lot of alerts here in the medium and high category. It kind of indicates that maybe there is just too many alerts coming out, or they're just not logging into the console on a regular basis to actually actively look at what's happening in their console. So that's the
Okay.
first thing we'd look at. And that's also the first metric I would record is how many alerts do we have? And then we can scroll down and see from the dashboard how many devices, how many users that the customer has, how many are active, how many are inactive for more than 2 months. So that's a conversation about IT health hygiene. Do they have machines that they may have replaced? We just need to remove them from Sophos. And importantly, how many are not protected? That's something we need to talk about. That's something where a customer has got part of the protection installed, but maybe it's either not configured correctly, or it's partly been removed, or there's something in there that's causing them a problem. So we talk about that. We also can flick over to the number of users they have, how many active users, how many with no devices. And if they have servers, then we also look at the server activity as well.
Okay. It's also probably a good time to check to make sure that the customer's licensed appropriately, right?
Correct. And we would definitely go into the licensing up here, check the licensing, and let's see what licenses they have. Okay, and also make sure they got the right partner as well. Sometimes you do see an old partner in here, and we can get that changed in the back end.
Makes sense.
Cool. So from here, it is perfectly legitimate, if you wish, to go to the account health check and just look at the account. I tend to leave this to last, mainly because I want to go through some of these settings with the customer and talk about them rather than just go straight to the dashboard and then leave it there. So what I would do, I would start off with the global settings. and we look at directory services. Are they using Active Directory, either on-premise or Azure? If not, we can talk about the benefits of having all the users and the groups being brought into Central to stop the replication of effort for administration in Central, and being able to make policies for users rather than just devices. Check the role management. Make sure they've got super admins, more than one. All right, so we need to have more than one super admin in here, but also make sure that whoever's in the super admins and the admins are still working there, and still legitimate users, and they don't just have generic accounts. All right, and then what we tend to do is scroll down, and the two areas of most concern are going to be global exclusions and allowed applications. So the global exclusions apply to servers and endpoints. Whatever you define in here, Sophos is not going to stop it being worked on, right? So there's a few things in here. We will automatically flag things like, insecure directories, like the whole of the P drive, not a very secure situation to be in. That's been flagged up already. Other things like incorrectly formatted exclusions. So this one, for example, if that is a file called manage engine, that's a great exclusion. However, if that's supposed to be a directory, and it is, this is not working at all. So we can remove that, it's not doing anything. And then the last one is potentially unwanted applications. We're going to be flagging up things like pxexec, NERCOM, REMCOM, that kind of thing. REMCOM is an interesting one. REMCOM does exactly the same as pxexec, only it's open source. It's not flagged as a potentially unwanted application. So I will be chatting to the customer about, do you realize this could be used by criminals to potentially run a lot of malware on a lot of machines? And because we've excluded REMCOM, it's not going to stop it from running. So that kind of thing here. And again, if we go back into global settings, in a similar vein, if we go down to the allowed applications, just to check that there's nothing in here. Or if there is anything in here, then we know exactly why it's in here. We got comments in here as to why it's in there. And essentially, just because we've got a device name for the application, it's not limited to that particular device. It will be for all devices across your entire network. So again, in a similar way that global settings need to be the minimum amount of exclusions possible, same with allowed applications.
Okay. I guess it's quite possible that organizations might have created an exception a long time ago for stuff that's no longer relevant. So it's
Correct.
a good opportunity.
Yeah, and this is good. Yeah, it's a perfect opportunity just to get the customer to review what is in your global settings and what's in your allowed applications, and then potentially remove it.
Makes a lot of sense.
Perfect. The other thing we want to check in here is the email alerts. So what a lot of customers tend to do is, for the frequency of emails, they tend to dial these down. We see this a lot. Maybe some of these medium alerts are too chatty, coming through too often. So they dial down the whole of the medium alerts to daily. And similarly for the high alerts to daily, we want to keep them at immediate and never. And there's a better way of managing alerts. So sometimes we'll go into this. If it's set to immediate, that's fine. If not, we'll maybe walk them through how do you control alerts. Okay, how do you set them up? And you do it with exceptions. So in here, the exceptions list are things that we've purposely altered. Okay, and to create a new one, it's as simple as going to alerts, choosing a type of alert, clicking on the arrow, and then where you've got the email alert frequency, because it's a medium alert, it will be immediately. We can dial down this type of alert to just daily, or I can make it even more frequently, or I can say none at all. And that would now create this particular type of alert, not all medium alerts, just this particular one, to be daily. So the restore failed, if I come down to my alerts again, look at the exceptions, and we can see that that's now been added to my list. Okay, and again, colorly, we can just get rid of these, delete the exceptions. That puts it back to the default. So that's the global settings for Intercept X Advanced customers. One more setting that you should check if they're an XDR customer, and that is in the global settings again, right down the bottom. We want to make sure that live response data lake uploads are turned on. By default, XDR customers, they're not turned on. So if we go to data lake uploads, we need to make sure this slider is set to enabled.
Not really a lot of point buying the XDR license if you're not going to send the telemetry off to the data lake, right?
Correct. Yeah, correct. And again, it's one of those things that they buy the license, they apply the license, and they forget that one little step. So that's the global settings in a nutshell. There's a lot more stuff you can do in the global settings, but those are the main points that if I'm doing a health check, those are the main points I will want to address and look at. The next thing I'd look at is the endpoint protection itself. So under the products, I go to endpoint and then across to policies. A couple of things in here. If I've got a threat protection with 5 policies in here, then I'm just going to look at these. The base policies are what I'm going to look at first. The first thing I'll say to the customers is, under the status, if anything's set to bypassed, then that's not working at all. So we've got a group of computers in this particular threat policy is set to bypass, that whatever's in that policy is not being applied. So if it's not being used, just get rid of it. And then if I come down to the base policy, what I want to see in the base policy, because this is going to apply to every computer that's not in another policy. Under the settings, what I want to see is that big green banner on the top. If that's ticked green, then everything below this, I know the protection is enabled and applied to the customer. So the machine learning, live protection, the real-time scanning of file, all this stuff here is great protection. That's all enabled, including the new things we put in here, like adaptive attack protection.
Okay.
The other thing I'll check, I'll recommend that they turn this on. This is not on by default. I've turned it on in my console. SSL decryption of HTTPS websites, a good thing to have enabled. And then the last thing I'll check is there aren't any other exclusions in here applying to the base policies. If there are, we'll have a chat about why they're in there. Are they actually needed? Does that make sense?
Certainly does. Certainly does. So you've got that self-check at the top there that guides you in the right direction.
That's it. Yeah, as soon as we see this is ticked in green, I'm happy that their base policy is set to be enabled. Then we can talk about, if we want to, we can go into other of these policies and just see what are these apply to. Are they configured? This one is not. That's what it looks like when something is not turned on. And then we can scroll down and ask the questions. Do you know that these are switched off? Is there a valid reason these are switched off? And then we can have that conversation about the risk of having some of these protections turned off.
Okay, makes a lot of sense.
Yep. After that, that's the kind of protection element. The rest of it is around more of a consultative education piece. Are they using peripheral control? Do they have anything to manage with their peripheral types? If not, then I'll quickly go in and explain how peripheral control works and the advantage of controlling access and then adding exemptions if needed. So in this particular case, I always recommend to my customers that their base policies should be the most restrictive and then add other policies to allow events to happen in your environment, but that's under your control. So we're making sure that my base policy is restrictive, and then if I wish to, I can then add more policies on top of that to allow other peripherals to be enabled.
Okay, that makes sense as well.
Yep. Same with application control. In this particular case, I can see at a glance if this was a customer's console that prohibited apps is not being used, get rid of that. But I can see they actually are making an attempt to essentially use application control. I'll ask them how it's going, any issues with that. If not, that's fine. If the customer's not using it at all, what I'll probably do is go to add a policy just to show how easy it is, select application control, and then basically walk them through exactly how to configure it. So we're going to enable the detections. We're going to say block. And now in the list, I need to tell it what applications I wish to block. So a classic example are old versions of Office. You'll see this in many large organizations that they've got old versions of Office kicking around. And essentially here with a couple of clicks, I can block old versions of Office from being used. Similarly, things like torrent applications, games, downloaders, anything that you're not licensed for or you don't want to be in your environment, we can just block it outright. And then you'd have to worry about it.
Again, makes a lot of sense.
Yep. So those are the base policies I will look at straight away. We will talk about data loss prevention if they are using it, if that's of interest. Generally, though, not very many people are using that. Web control is, again, something I want to monitor. If they've got a product that's doing it already, that's fine. But if they don't, then we'll want to see, are they using their policies? Is it enabled? And are they setting it to the defaults? Keeping it clean, allowing data sharing, blocking risky downloads. Those are the defaults out of the box. And this basically means that you don't have to be behind a firewall to have web control protecting your remote users.
Oh, perfect. I mean, especially now in an age where many people work from home, that's ideal, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah. And customers can also, if they need to, reclassify websites and retag them to either allow or block specific websites as well. That's done down here with the website management. So again, a nice, interesting conversation to have with customers, enabling them to get the best out of the products that they've already bought. Right. So from here, then those are the main touch points for endpoint protection. And now we'll just do this similar thing for servers if they've got the server protection installed under the policies. And again, what you'll see under server protection policies is a very similar situation. We've got base policies for threat protection, peripheral control. We've also got application control as well, if they're using them. And again, what we want to see is all the protections enabled. Okay, and if we scroll down the list, what we don't want to see is any risky exclusions in this particular case here.
Okay, so are there any policies that are specific to servers that we need to be aware of?
Yeah, so there are a couple of policies in here, the server policies. Yeah, so we can talk about peripheral control, application control as well, and web, but there are a couple of things in here. Lockdown is one of them, and then file integrity monitoring is the other one. These are specific to servers and only available to servers. Lockdown, again, what that will do is apply extra levels of defense for servers that have lockdown applied. Essentially, once you apply lockdown to a server, you're not able then to install or run applications or programs that weren't available or installed before lockdown was applied. So it's like an extra suit of armor around servers. And I used to use these on my domain controllers just to give me the extra level of protection that you could not then go sideways into a server and install anything on it.
Okay, so that obviously prevents unauthorized installation of applications, but potentially could also
Yeah.
thwart cyber criminals if they're trying to install something on there.
Exactly. One of the things they'll do is if they get into a network, they'll try to define the domain controllers, attack those, install some persistence to enable them to get back in, or whatever kind of malicious code or programs they wish. That's exactly what they'll do, and lockdown will help alleviate that particular threat. And the
Okay.
other one then is file integrity monitoring. So this essentially was brought in more for PCI DSS compliance, and it does exactly what it says on the tin. It will monitor critical Windows system files for any changes being made. So think about your hosts file, for example. Somebody comes in and adds a host entry to the host file. This will then create an event to alert that the critical Windows system files have been altered. You can also use this to monitor folders and files from your own locations as well. So you can put your own custom locations in for things that you definitely want to know have been altered. Okay, so that's endpoint and that's server. So if we go back to the dashboard itself, when we scroll down, we can sort of see some of the telemetry we're getting from the endpoints in terms of web control. The other thing we'll talk about customers is, do they have anything in the public cloud? Have they got servers in Azure, servers in AWS or Google? If so, and they have Intercept X Advanced for Server, they're licensed for Cloud Optics, and they really should be activating and using Cloud Optics to help protect that cloud infrastructure. And then what we'll do is look at the threat analysis center. We'll look at the type of threats that are seeing. Now, for Intercept X Advanced customers, they'll get threat graphs. And in here, what we'll be doing is looking for high priority threats, just clicking on these, investigating them a little bit with the customer. Did you know what this is? Did we investigate it? What was the result of it? Anything we can help them with in terms of these alerts. XDR customers would get the bigger dashboard. So they're going to see the types of threats that will be behavioral, not just out and out malicious attacks. And again, what we'll do in here is look at detections. And what I'm really interested in is looking at the high and critical attacks or detections and seeing, are they actually responding to these? Have they seen them? What have they done? Because that can sometimes lead to a conversation more around the managed detection and response piece if they're not really looking at their console.
Sure. So I guess with XDR, if you're not using the tools that are included in there to do those threat investigations, you're not really getting the best out of that. And maybe actually having an external team like the Sophos XOps team looking at it through the MDR service probably makes a lot more sense, right?
Absolutely, yeah. And if they are an XDR customer, then we want to just quickly have a look at the integrations, just to make sure they've got things like Security Graph API, 365 Management Activity Log, and if they've got other Sophos products like Cloud Optics, firewalls, that they're all set up and integrated and working correctly.
So within the dashboard, you can see more than just the telemetry coming from the endpoints and the servers. You can also see third-party integrations with Microsoft and the bigger portfolio of Sophos products.
Absolutely, yeah. And they can run the live discover queries, they can run the detections themselves. And again, that's a conversation we'd have with an XDR customer, is in terms of how many detections are you running, how many queries are you running? Are you running scheduled queries? And if not, did you know you could do that? And if not, well, maybe we could have that conversation about managed detection and response. Finally, then, as part of that whole discovery piece, that whole reporting element, I'd normally go into the report section and just highlight that all these built-in reports, these pre-can reports that customers can run, not only can they run them, they can also get them automatically sent by Sophos to their inboxes as well. So they don't even have to log in. And the one I'll usually draw attention to is the malware and PUAs blocked. This is a really useful report to have running. And essentially what you can do is choose a time period over which you want this to be run. And there we can see a graph of any spikes of activity of malware and PUAs being downloaded, which machines are being not targeted, but what users are downloading malware and PUAs. But also we can save this as a custom report and we can give this a name and then have it delivered to my inbox, either as a PDF or a CSV at a date, a time of my choosing. So I can do it monthly, I can do it the first Monday of every month, or weekly. This is a great way to have this automation being delivered into your inbox without necessarily having to log into Sophos to get that report.
Fantastic. Great way of justifying why you've bought the product in the first place, if you've got to go back to the board and that kind of thing.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah. And then the last thing we'll do is, we talked about a lot about the policies, the threat policies, and the settings. And we can see from the dashboard, there is a account health check dashboard. If we click on this, this gives us a 10,000-foot view of that customer's estate. So we can see now at a glance what issues you may have. Is your protection installed? Are the policies all set, configured correctly? Do you have tamper protection enabled? And then if not, we can actually look at the devices that have got tamper protection turned off, fix it automatically or snooze these alerts for a little period of time. So this is just a great way of seeing at a glance, where are my risks? Where are my potential attack vectors coming from? And this is all from the account health check.
Okay, so that's a quick and easy way of doing probably a large proportion of some of the things you've just looked at manually, right?
Correct. Yeah, but the point about doing it manually with a customer is just kind of just walk them through that whole experience of looking at their policies to make them understand why certain things aren't configured correctly, rather than just coming into the health check and going, oh look, we've got an exclusion, let's just fix it automatically, and not really understanding why it was put there in the first place, who maybe did it, what machines is it affecting.
Yeah, because there may be legitimate reasons. It's understanding why you've made those changes and exceptions, right? Okay.
Exactly. Yeah. And then that's it. After that, we'll take this information that we've gathered during this particular engagement, and then I will personally generate a report. I've got a spreadsheet that I can share with you guys with the points on there that we've gone through. We'll generate that as a report and send it with an email with any follow-up collateral, any links to any KBA articles that might be of interest and use to that customer. And that's the health check in a nutshell.
Fantastic. I mean, that was a really good way of going through the policies there and the settings, and a great way for the reseller to prove their value and demonstrate how they're looking after the customer. And of course, always that extra opportunity as well, maybe to apply some extra licenses if those sorts of things are required. So, and it's not a massive amount of commitment in time either. I mean, that hasn't really taken us very long to go through at all, has it?
No, not at all. I mean, it generally takes around 40 minutes to an hour just to walk through those settings and talk about the estate and talk about some of maybe the challenges they've had. Maybe they don't know about some of the features that they have enabled in Sixa that they could use. Again, that whole consolidation piece. Maybe they're paying for third-party products and they don't need to. We can use Sixa to do that and control it all from Sophos Central.
Very good. That was a really good walkthrough, Mark. Thank you very much indeed for taking time out to do that. Hopefully the audience will find that really useful as well, and use that as a template and a guide to conduct your own health checks as well. As Mark mentioned, we're both on hand if you want any guidance, or if you want some of the supporting documentation that we use as a basis, then that's absolutely fine. Just reach out, get in touch. But hope you found it useful, and thanks for watching.